Good evening, everyone. Mayor Paul Braun here. Thank you so much for coming out this evening, and welcome to the Flossmoor Police Department Safety Information Webinar. We thought this was very important and timely topic for all of us, both to discuss our safety within the community and as well as outside when we're not here in Flossmoor. And I want to introduce our terrific panelists who are going to put on a terrific program for us here this evening. I want to introduce our Police Chief, Todd Kamleiter. Just wave your hand when I introduce you, please. Deputy Chief Clint Wagner is with us. Commander Keith Taylor is here with us as well. Detective Nick Kausal giving up his evening here. Thank you so much, Detective. And we have two terrific people from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office this evening. We have Assistant State's Attorney Deputy Supervisor in the Markham Courthouse, Kathryn Morrissey. And last but not least, we have the Chief of the Juvenile Justice Bureau here for the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, Maryam, Ahmad. So without further ado, Chief, would you like to give us the onset here as we move into the webinar this evening?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to first thank all of those that have been logged in tonight and are in attendance. I'd like to thank our police department staff. They've done a great job putting this together in short notice. Special thanks to Amy Kent, the village's communication director. She's done a phenomenal job getting this webinar off the ground. And again, thanks to our partners in the State's Attorney's Office for joining us. We have a unique partnership and we work well together. And if you have questions that you would like to ask during the presentation, you can use the Q&A function. Deputy Chief Wagner will be monitoring that. Keith Taylor, Commander Taylor, will offer a presentation of our content. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have when we're done. Commander Taylor.
Thank you very much, Chief. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. During this PowerPoint presentation, we will cover some trends that we're seeing with respect to both carjacking and vehicle thefts. We'll talk about what we're doing to combat that, and we'll give you some safety tips to guard yourself and make yourself a harder target for both carjackings and vehicle theft. Flossmoor has not experienced any carjackings to date, and we're very grateful for that. But even if you follow all of the tips that we're going to provide, it's not going to necessarily mean that you won't be or couldn't be a victim of carjacking or vehicle theft. So, as I mentioned, we've seen an uptick in carjackings in the Chicagoland area and the surrounding suburbs and across the country. Some of the reasoning for that, as determined by the Police Executive Research Forum, which is an independent research organization that deals with police matters, and they're talking with some of the chiefs from various parts of the country, have all mentioned that they started to see upticks when the onset of COVID came about. And a lot of things shut down as a result of people losing their jobs, and the measures that were put in place to tamp down the spread of COVID caused a lot of people who would normally be, children who would normally be in school, but not. They were free to roam around and do various things unattended. And due to the economic climate that caused people to probably resort to other measures to bring in funds for the family and other things. And so in Chicago, in just this first month of the year, there were 218 reported carjackings. That's more than a 100% increase from that time last year in carjackings. So those threats have increased in south suburbs, and obviously has garnered a lot of concern from our residents. Flossmoor remains one of the most safest communities in Illinois, and it's very important that we work in collaboration with our residents to keep it that way. And so I wanted to just start off with some numbers that you may not be aware of with respect to some of the things we've seen in vehicle thefts. There were 10 reported stolen vehicles in Flossmoor in 2020. The previous year, there were 14, so we did see a slight decrease. But what is alarming and certainly could be something that would help us prevent that is we noticed that all of the stolen vehicles were unlocked, and some of them had keys in the car. Most of them did if they weren't already running. at the time. So we had both vehicles that were running and vehicles that were unlocked that had the keys in them that weren't running. And so if we can just do a better job of securing our vehicles and our personal property, we believe that will certainly assist us in quelling some of these vehicle thefts that we've seen. And in conjunction with those vehicle thefts, we've had 40 reported vehicle burglaries in Flossmoor in 2020. And again, in all of those cases, the vehicles were left unlocked. So it's very important to keep all of your personal property that is of value out of the cars if you can avoid that. If not, make certain that they're not visible by somebody just coming up and looking at the vehicle. Try to put them in your trunk and lock them up or cover them with another item, a blanket, a jacket, or something. It's very important that we lock up our property if we want to keep it maintained. With respect to carjacking safety, obviously it can happen anywhere. And some of the places that people are most vulnerable are in their driveways, sitting there either warming the car up before they take off, coming back from a hard day's work or whatever it may be. The parking lots and public garages, gas stations, using the ATM machine, or when you're sitting in an intersection with a stoplight. Those are some of the areas that motorists are, can be very vulnerable to carjacking attempts. These are some of the scenarios that we find, and some of the tactics that the carjackers are using. There's the bump and run tactic, which means that either you're sitting at a stoplight or somewhere and someone will come up behind you and lightly tap you with their vehicle, which is usually another stolen vehicle. And as you get out to assess the damage, if there's any damage to your vehicle, one of the passengers jumps out and they jump in your car and take off, or hold you at gunpoint and take off. So if you are the victim of a crash or a rear-end collision, one of the things you can do is you don't have to necessarily get out of the car, pull over to the side of the road, or if you are suspicious of what went on and you think it may be a ploy to get that car from you, you can certainly get on the phone to the police, put your flashers on, and drive to the nearest police station. Once we get that call, once the dispatchers get that call of a traffic collision or anything that you think is suspicious in an event like that, they will begin to dispatch that call to our officers, and we can be en route to your location in a matter of seconds. And then there's the stranded motorist ploy, which means that you can have somebody on the side of the road with the flashers up, the hood up, perhaps they're waving their hands to get your attention, hoping that you will pull over. A lot of times that's a ploy to get you to pull over and offer assistance. And then somebody from the back seat of the car gets out and carjacks you. So one of the things you can do, if you are concerned that this might be an actual stranded motorist, rather than stopping, you can get on the phone, dial 911. You can take note of the type of vehicle it is, and certainly the location. Give that information to the dispatcher. They'll dispatch an officer there. And we can come and check it out ourselves. You don't necessarily have to feel guilty about not stopping if somebody's trying to flag it out. All right. What you'll see as we continue on in the slides are some common themes. And the main thing is to be aware of your surroundings, have situational awareness, and think about a proper exit strategy if you need to make a hasty escape. So always be aware of what's going on. Make it a habit. If you're going to get in your car, you lock your doors immediately and drive away. Look around for suspicious persons, people sitting in vehicles or loitering around in an area before you get out of your car or before you get in your car. When you're out shopping, park in a well-lit, visible area if you can. I like trying to park on a parking lot lights. Again, it gives me more visibility to see around my vehicle as I'm approaching, coming out of the car, coming out of the store, pardon me. And it allows other people to see me as well, if someone was to be amiss. If you can afford it, and if your vehicle doesn't have it, you can certainly equip it with anti-theft devices, GPS. This is more along the lines of keeping the car from being stolen when you're not in it. And when you are in it, and make certain that you give yourself enough space to maneuver around, stop traffic. You come to any type of intersection, whether it be governed by a stoplight, or a stop sign. Don't just crowd the bumper of the car in front of you. Give yourself enough room, at least a car length or so, to move around if you need to get out of the way if you see something that's not right. And keep your cell phone on you in your pocket. So if, God forbid, you're carjacked, you have a device where you can call and ask for assistance. It's also very important to always know where you are. Know where you are, know your vehicle, license plate, know what direction you're traveling, because these are questions that dispatchers will probably more likely will ask you. Where are you? Did you get a description of the person who carjacked you? Did you get a description of the car? Perhaps did they arrive there? What is your vehicle description? What's your license plate number? Make certain that you know those things so you can give that information, which will help us in catching those people. All right, we have a video that we want to play now. It's a short video that has some of the same information that is in the PowerPoint, and it is produced by Channel 7 with news reporter Evelyn Holmes. And I'll come back on the other side and then continue on with the PowerPoint.
Join Sam's Club. One minor difficulty, hold on.
We always think it won't happen to me, but as the simulation shows, it only takes seconds to become the victim of a carjacking.
You have a lot of opportunities to do things right and to keep yourself from being a victim.
Security expert Moody Andrews has spent more than 25 years in law enforcement and security and took me through several carjacking scenarios to try to avoid becoming a victim. He says if confronted, simply give up the car.
All right, this is how it's done. You see her back was turned. She wasn't looking around. She was trying to figure out where were her keys.
He says one of the biggest mistakes people make, besides not being aware of their surroundings, is sitting distracted in your car with the doors unlocked.
Always do it in a situation where people are constantly moving and coming around you. That's the best way to do it.
Like near a police station or in a parking lot of a fast food restaurant. So far this year in Chicago, vehicular hijackings have almost doubled in number for the same time last year, and carjackings increased over 100% from 2019 to 2020. Andrews says another costly mistake is not leaving yourself an escape route.
If you can see the back wheels of the car, then you're too close. I say keep a half a car distance in front of you.
Some carjackers have even been known to fake an accident to approach you and steal your car. So fast. Don't stop. Try to get the license plate and head to the nearest police station. And while Andrews cautions that there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to avoiding being a victim of crime, he says being prepared for trouble is a good start.
Right now, you need everything you possibly can to keep yourself safe. Not your possession, but to keep yourself safe.
Evelyn Holmes, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Hey, if you like that video, be sure to subscribe to our...
All right, thank you. So just to recap some of the things we saw in that video, if you are carjacked, give up your car, leave the scene. The vehicle can be replaced. You are irreplaceable. If you can't avoid verbal and physical confrontations with the carjackers. And as I mentioned, remember the suspect's description, the vehicle's description, the direction of travel if you know it. And God forbid there be a child in the vehicle. That may be something that you can tell them, and it may change their mind. There's no guarantee that it will. And then call 911 immediately to report the crime. One thing you don't want to do, though, is to, some people think that if they tell us that there's a child in the car or add something to what occurred, that they're going to get a faster police response or more robust police response, but that's not true. And you can get yourself in trouble by telling us that there's a child in the car, and there isn't. That happened to a Chicago lady who ran in to get something from somewhere. Someone jumped in the car and took off, and she thought she'd get a better police response if she told them that a child was in the car. There was no child in the car, and I don't know what the outcome of her case was, but she was possibly facing the charges of filing of false police reports. So we definitely don't want to do that. If you tell us a car has been stolen or been carjacked, we're going to do everything we can to get that car back without any extra things added to it. All right. And with respect to some of the vehicle theft or anti-theft systems that are out there, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration recommends installing an audible alarm system if the car does not already have one. And sometimes the flashing lights of a vehicle is enough to, that alarm on the vehicle is enough to maybe deter them, and they may decide they'll go someplace else. But certainly one of the biggest things you can do is lock that vehicle. Some of the vehicles are equipped with cutoff switches and OnStar features and other applications and things. We don't particularly endorse any one product, but there are certainly a bevy of different options out there, and as a consumer, it's upon you to do your proper due diligence and research and figure out what's best for you, what you can afford, and what you think will work best given your particular lifestyle and habits. All right, again with vehicle theft tips for trying to avoid this from happening. Again, we reiterate to never leave your car running and unattended. Most vehicle thefts, happen in residential areas. They can happen anywhere. And so one of the most important things we can do is to guard against having a false sense of security. As I mentioned before, Flossmoor is one of the safest communities around. Just because it is doesn't mean we should let our guard down and not do the things we need to do to protect ourselves and our property. As I said, make it happen. Lock your doors every time you leave your vehicle, even at home. One of the things that I do before I leave the house, when I leave to come to work here in the mornings, it's usually dark during this time of year, so I'm going to be looking outside to see if there are any strange vehicles that I don't recognize. I happen to live in a cul-de-sac, so I can peep out. All of my neighbors park in their garages, and so if I see any car that's suspicious, I'll know it before I actually get in my vehicle. And I do have a attached garage, so I can get into my car without having to come outside of my house. When I get in, I lock my doors before I let the garage up. My car is started, and I'm ready to go. I've already looked outside to see if there's anything suspicious going on before I come out. So it's important to do those things and just be aware. If you have motion lights, are those motion lights activated? It could be just an animal passing by, or it could be somebody that's near your house waiting to accost you. Next slide. All right, and some of the things to help guard against getting property stolen from your vehicles. Again, always lock your doors when you leave your vehicle. Avoid leaving any valuables in your vehicle or in plain sight. If you can, if you don't have to have them in your car, then any electronics, like your laptops, credit cards, wallets, GPS units, cell phones, don't leave those things in your car. Even if you're gonna run into the store for a quick second, at least have them out of sight, or if you can carry them on your person, do so, and always lock your doors. And if you can't remove those items, like I said before, put them in the trunk. Even if you're out shopping, put them in the trunk. If you're going to multiple places, when you come out, or cover them with a blanket or a jacket, and try to avoid hiding them in the glove boxes in the console when they get in. That's probably going to be the first place they look for certain things. All right. That concludes our short PowerPoint presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Chief Kamleiter.
I guess before we open this back up to any questions, I think our detective, Nick Kausal, who's worked on some of these cases with other jurisdictions, may have something to add. Nick?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna just a few notes I took from the previous presentation. I was just going to go over a few things. Obviously, I'm usually working on the reactive portion of these incidents after they already happen, and staying in contact with other jurisdictions around. A lot of these incidents, obviously, the officer that shows up is going to need to take the information for the vehicle. Things that were mentioned in the previous presentation, obviously have on hand type of car, make car, color of your car, your license plate on hand, things that we can get out as quick as possible so that we can put this car in as stolen so that surrounding jurisdictions, if it's seen, can take action. Other things is anything unique about your vehicle. A lot of the times, if there's enough time, the offender sometimes they switch license plates. So if they do so, any stickers, any dents, anything that would make your car stick out from all the other vehicles on the roadway would be beneficial to know about. Some things that are good to know. One of the types of vehicles that remain high targets are the Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler makes, the Dodge Chargers, Dodge Challengers, Jeep Cherokees, Chrysler 300s. All those seem to be high targets for carjackings and thefts. A lot of the newer models have key fobs. One thing to know, that a vehicle will run and remain running even without the key fob inside, as long as it was started with the key fob. So if you have it in your pocket and you leave it running at a gas station, anyone can jump in that car and drive it for weeks on end as long as it's being filled with gas. We've seen where cars have been recovered after 2 weeks with no key fob in it and it's just been left running. Other things to note is I've been working with Commander Taylor and Chief on being more involved on the Neighbors app regarding Ring doorbells and other security systems. You may see me on there posting more or responding to people's posts, requesting video. We're more than willing to follow up on everything that people can give us. Obviously, I can only follow up on the leads that I'm given. So the more video, the more leads I'm given or my partner's given, the more we can follow up on. So we're going to be posting more on that Neighbors app, requesting video. I'm going to be keeping an eye on them more because a lot of times these incidents are related. A victim's car today could be the offending car tomorrow. So a lot of times these offenders do show up in different vehicles. So any vehicle or any subject walking on the roadway in that area may be beneficial to our investigation. So I'm going to be on there more, and anyone can always reach out and make contact with me. That's pretty much all I have right now. Any other further questions, obviously I'll answer after Chief speaks.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it. Before we move on, we do have a couple questions in the Q&A that we'd like to get to. But before we do that, I'd like to invite our friends from the State Attorney's Office to make a statement. Go ahead. I'm not sure who's going first, but
I'll defer to Ms. Morrissey first.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Mayor Braun, Chief, and everybody for putting this town hall together and allowing me to be a panelist here, and thank everybody who's tuning in this evening. My name is Kathryn Morrissey. I am a Deputy Supervisor at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office in Markham Courthouse, just down 165th and Kedzie, excuse me. I'd like to say that there has been undoubtedly an explosion of carjackings in our county, both in the city and in the suburban areas. And we are working diligently with our law enforcement partners and our federal partners, the FBI, the ATF, many federal agencies, and our communities to deal with the rise in carjackings. It's kind of an everybody on deck, all hands on deck approach. I would like to just briefly set out how cases are brought to us at the adult level, the charges applicable at the adult level, and the sentencing range at the adult level. Maryam will talk about the juvenile level. The State's Attorney's Office at the adult level comes at the end of the process. We come in after the arrests are made. Once the arrest of the adult, that's 18 and above, are made, the cases are reviewed by our felony review unit. We do not review misdemeanor cases. They're filed directly by law enforcement agencies. In 2020, we reviewed and approved 95% of vehicular hijacking cases presented to us by our law enforcement partners in suburban Cook County. In 2021 so far, as of February 1st, we've reviewed 27 suburban cases of possession of a stolen motor vehicle and vehicular hijacking and approved 93%. For vehicular hijackings, we have so far this year gotten 5 cases in and approved all 5 cases. After this initial review of charges of the case, the offender is then taken to bond court. It's at bond court where we present all the relevant facts to the judge. Facts of the case, the offender's background, and any other pertinent or relevant information that we have, sometimes even down to social media. The defense will then speak to the judge on the offender's behalf. He's a lifelong resident of Cook County. He has a job, his education. After hearing from both the state and the defense, the judge ultimately sets the bond in the case. We do not set the bond. The judge ultimately determines what the bond amount is and whether someone is given electronic monitoring or any other conditions. Additionally, at bond court, if someone has a pending case or they're on probation at the time of their new arrest, we'll file what's called a violation of bail bond. And then the judge will often hold that person no bail and set them before the judge on which they, in the courtroom where they have their case pending. The same goes for violation of probation. If on probation, the judge will often hold them no bail, and then those motions are heard within 48 hours where the judge who is hearing the pending case or the probation case is sitting in that courtroom. So they'll be in, say, weekend bond court, and then on Tuesday, they're in the courtroom where their case is pending. So what are the charges that the commander talked about? He talked about vehicular hijacking, aggravated vehicular hijacking, possession of a stolen motor vehicle. Vehicular hijacking is taking a vehicle from a person by force or threatening the use of force. At the adult level, the sentencing range is 4 to 15 years in the Department of Corrections and is non-probationable. It is called a Class 1 felony. Aggravated vehicular hijacking is just that. It is vehicular hijacking with an aggravating factor. These aggravating factors could be taking a vehicle by, well, it's taking a vehicle by force from a person 60 years of age or older, or that the vehicle had a passenger who was 16 years old or younger inside at the time of the carjacking. As Commander Key said, the baby in the car seat. Or if the offender used a dangerous weapon. If the offender used a dangerous weapon, it has a different sentencing range. If the offender uses a firearm, again, another aggravating factor, that brings in a whole new range of sentencing factors. If they were armed with the firearm, if they discharged the firearm during the offense, or if they discharged the firearm causing death or great bodily harm. So an aggravated vehicular hijacking is what's called a Class X offense. It is just under murder. It is the top felony offense. The sentencing range for a normal Class X offense would be 6 to 30 years in the Department of Corrections. And as I mentioned, having a dangerous weapon, not a firearm, bumps that up a little bit. That bumps it to 7 to 30 years. So you start out at the bottom, not 6, it's 7. And if you're armed with a firearm, then your sentencing range goes up to a minimum of 21. You add 15 years on for being armed with a firearm. If you discharge that firearm in the course of the offense, you've just added 20 years. So now you're looking at a minimum of 26. Now, if you inflict great bodily harm, if you inflict, God forbid, death, first of all, you'd be looking at murder, but you could be looking at life imprisonment. So that's adding an additional 25 to life onto the bottom of the sentence. So 31 to life. What's the other offenses that we heard about? Possession of a stolen motor vehicle. That's defined under statute as a person is not entitled to the possession of a vehicle and the offender knows it was stolen. Now, the legislature has expanded the knowledge of a defendant by allowing us to infer knowledge from the surrounding facts and circumstances. Before, you needed a peeled column, and I don't know if anybody knows. I know certainly the officers know what a peeled column is, and it's when the column outside is taken off and the wires are exposed, or there's a screwdriver sticking into the ignition. Well, they used to have ignitions. I may be dating myself. But now, you don't need that. You can infer unexplained possession from the surrounding facts and circumstances. However, you still need a victim to testify that he or she did not give the defendant permission to drive his or her car and did not know the person. Sometimes that can be a stumbling block. So we still need the victim to cooperate. The sentencing range for possession of a stolen motor vehicle, it's a class 2 felony. It is probationable. It is 3 to 7 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. And finally, there is another category involving cars. The officers didn't mention it. It's a misdemeanor. It's criminal trespass to motor vehicle. And that's where someone knowingly and without permission of the owner enters any part of the car. And that's a class A misdemeanor, and it's punishable by up to 364 days in the county jail or conditional discharge or supervision. For example, if I was driving a stolen car and I had 3 friends in the car and that car gets pulled over, I would be the one charged with possession of a stolen motor vehicle. My friends, if charged, would be charged with the criminal trespass to the motor vehicle. So that's a brief explanation of the review process and the charges and the sentencing ranges. I can tell you that in 2020, even with COVID and the court closures, we were able to prosecute in suburban Cook County 17 vehicular hijacking cases. And we're able to successfully convict 15 of those individuals who were charged with vehicular hijacking, aggravated vehicular hijacking, or an attempt vehicular hijacking. As for possession of a stolen motor vehicle, again, in 2020, we were able to charge 105 people in suburban Cook County with possession of a stolen motor vehicle and able to convict 85. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is, at least part of it, is that all hands on deck approach. We are working together in task forces with our police partners, our community members, our federal partners. We're using technology to come up with our solutions. What's needed to make the cases better? Well, the mask requirements have not helped us. Everybody's wearing a mask now, so identification has been problematic. So hopefully when the mask requirement is released, that will help us. Long-term investigations, these are going on. That's what we're looking at, the links between the people who do it, how they choose their victims, and where the cars go. And then we're looking at how we can work together. The information that we have at bond court, as I said, social media. How can we present that to the judge, that this person is a threat to the public, highlighting that so that the judge can feel comfortable and will give us that higher bond. So we're pulling all these things together. Hopefully, when COVID goes away someday, we'll have better identifications. But the technology, the cooperation, the long-term investigations, these will help win the war against this rise in carjackings. And we will always prosecute these cases to the highest degree we can under the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Good evening, Mayor Braun and Chief Kamleiter. Good evening to the Flossmoor Police Command, and good evening to the Flossmoor residents. My name is Maryam Ahmad, and I am the Chief of the Juvenile Justice Bureau for the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. I really want to thank you all for allowing Ms. Morrissey and myself to come out tonight. I am particularly happy to be here in light of COVID not allowing us to go many places, because the proceedings in juvenile court are confidential. Actually, the public knows very little about what happens. So it's refreshing to me to be able to come out and share with you, the people of our county, what happens in juvenile court. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office Juvenile Justice Division case screening process involves working with all of Cook County's police departments. In fact, our process is incomplete without the assistance of the police. The police bring the Juvenile Justice Division cases, and we can actually only review cases brought directly to us by our police departments. Now, Ms. Morrissey went into detail about the nature of adult criminal prosecutions. Just initially, there are two major differences between adult criminal prosecutions and juvenile prosecutions. For juveniles, the first difference is the age of the offender, meaning individuals under the age of 18. And the second difference is the sentence outcome. Ms. Morrissey went through the sentencing ranges for offenses like vehicular hijacking, aggravated vehicular hijacking, and a possession of a stolen motor vehicle. By law, those sentence outcomes are different for juveniles, and I'm going to go through that a little later in my presentation. I first would like to talk to you about what happens with cases when they come to the Juvenile Justice Division. The police, as I mentioned earlier, bring a case to the division, and that case is screened by an assistant state's attorney from the Juvenile Justice Division. When that juvenile assistant state's attorney is reviewing that case initially, that assistant is looking for two factors. One, that assistant is determining whether or not probable cause exists. Probable cause is the legal term for, is it more likely than not that the person arrested for the offense committed the offense, and is the offender, is there sufficient evidence that the offender committed the alleged crime? The second determination by the assistant state's attorney is there a reasonable belief that if I bring this case into court, that I can meet my burden beyond the reasonable doubt, because that's the burden that an assistant state's attorney must meet in court before the judge. And if those questions are answered in the affirmative, then the assistant, as a part of our process, files that case in court. And then the case and the offender proceed to a juvenile court judge. Again, at that first court date, the juvenile judge is also making a determination of probable cause. And just to reiterate, is it more likely than not that the person who stands before the judge committed the crime? And if the judge believes that probable cause exists, he or she will make a finding. The second issue deals with custody status. Now, Ms. Morrissey talked about bond court and discussed the different bond court options that an adult criminal judge can utilize, one being a monetary bond. However, by law in juvenile court, there are no monetary bonds. And so in terms of determining custody status, that juvenile judge is determining, pursuant to statute, whether or not urgent and immediate necessity exists. That is this an offense or a crime of violence? The second question the judge is asking regarding urgent and immediate necessity is whether or not the alleged offender is a threat to the community. A third factor is the age of the offender. A fourth factor is that offender a threat to someone in the family or in the home? And then the next consideration is what is actually going on in that home environment. And if that judge makes a finding of urgent and immediate necessity, that judge can order the pre-trial detention or custody of the juvenile offender at the Juvenile Temporary Detention Center. The judge can also order electronic monitoring, and in cases where the offense is not a crime of violence, the judge can order a curfew or other restrictions within the home. And that analysis occurs with every single case on the first court date at juvenile court. And so the judge, because we're talking about vehicular hijackings specifically, it's my experience that in juvenile court, for cases like vehicular hijacking and certainly aggravated vehicular hijacking, that those judges are making findings of urgent and immediate necessity and either holding the juvenile offenders in custody pre-trial or releasing them on electronic monitoring. Now, juvenile detention rules are different than for adults. Pre-trial detention rules. And so pre-trial, the maximum period of detention for a non-murder or sex case is 45 days. That's statute. And so if a minor is detained on a case like a vehicular hijacking or an aggravated vehicular hijacking, after 30 days, the judge will review the juvenile accused offender's detention status and might step the minor down, step the juvenile down to electronic monitoring. However, if the juvenile violates electronic monitoring, either by cutting the monitor or violating the rules by leaving the home, the court will issue a juvenile arrest warrant for that juvenile. So in cases, particularly in hijacking, where you hear in the media that a person was out on electronic monitoring as a juvenile and committing more offenses while on electronic monitoring, that usually happens in a situation where that juvenile is already wanted on a warrant and is out committing offenses while being wanted on that warrant. Now, Ms. Morrissey provided some adult statistics, and I too would like to share some Juvenile Justice Division data regarding our prosecutions. In terms of suburban Cook County, as it relates to vehicular hijackings, in the year 2018, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office Juvenile Division reviewed 26 suburban carjacking cases, and we filed 24 of them with a filing rate of 92%. In 2019, the Juvenile Justice Division Suburban Assistants reviewed 23 vehicular hijacking cases with a filing rate of 19 for a percentage rate of 83%. And in 2020, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office Juvenile Division reviewed 35 cases for vehicular hijacking and filed 33 with a filing percentage of 94%. And so far in January of 2021, the Juvenile Justice Division received 4 suburban cases and filed 3 of those cases. Ms. Morrissey also mentioned COVID-19. So while COVID-19 and the wearing of facial coverings has been a challenge, our data really shows that we still are successfully filing vehicular hijacking or carjacking cases. And that's because we're relying on data and science and vehicle forensics and eyewitness testimony and witness testimonies and surveillance technology. And at the end of the day, frankly, police grit and determination to work up these cases in concert with the state's attorney's office and in concert with critical tips and information from the residents of our communities. I mentioned a little earlier that the sentence outcomes for juvenile offenders is different than for adults. This is in accordance with Illinois law. The sentence range for carjackings is anywhere for juveniles from 5 years court-ordered probation up to incarceration in the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice until the age of 21. Additionally, regarding some of the strategies that we're implementing in the Juvenile Justice Division and initiatives on which we are working with police departments. First of all, the assistant state's attorneys are immediately providing to our law enforcement departments juvenile warrant information, so that if a juvenile cuts off his electronic monitoring device or flees his or her home, we will immediately notify the police of that warrant, because juvenile warrants actually aren't entered into the same system of notification that adult warrants are entered in. So to circumvent that, we give the warrants directly to the police department, so offenders aren't out basically AWOL picking up more cases. Additionally, we're utilizing criminal conduct posted by juveniles who are court involved on social media to seek violations on their pre-trial release conditions and probation. So for most juvenile offenders, I find that most juveniles post their crimes on social media. Indeed, for a young person, if they didn't post it on social media, then it didn't happen. And offenders want bragging rights. But here's what's the travesty. The travesty is when we look at these accounts, we see that these young people are posting the videos of their criminal activities, and they have hundreds, if not thousands of followers. There was one young man who was posting videos of his carjackings who had 3,500 followers, and none of them said anything. So the other effort that we're making is continuing our training with police departments all over Cook County to impart skills on working up felony juvenile cases. We're facilitating charging and the issuance of pre-arrest search warrants, pre-arrest fingerprint and DNA warrants for our police partners as it relates to juveniles. We're filing enhanced penalty petitions when we're able to meet those filing criteria for offenders who are repeat offenders. And we're continuing our work on a number of special task forces. Ms. Morrissey mentioned that regarding our work with ATF, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Cook County Sheriff Police, of course, our Cook County law enforcement departments, and also the DEA, all of the federal agencies and working up these cases on these carjackings. As Ms. Morrissey said, our view is right now, it's all hands on deck. So that's an overview of juvenile prosecutions, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you, Chief Kamleiter.
I appreciate that. Thank you both. Even I picked up a few things that I wasn't aware of, and I appreciate that very much. I'd like to add to the juvenile justice side, and we are committed, and with our work through the Chicagoland Juvenile Justice Coalition, and with the assistance from the State Attorney's Office, to create some more opportunities for court diversion for juveniles. May not be for that carjacking offender, but if we can get them for the lesser minor offenses that may lead up to that, we may be able to make a dent in some of those other crimes. Looks like we have some questions in the Q&A. Deputy Chief Wagner has answered some of those directly, but we're going to share those questions and some of those answers with you right now. Deputy Chief Wagner.
Great, thank you, Chief Kamleiter. And again, I'd like to thank everybody that's participating tonight. One of the very first questions that came up today was, if you call 911 while you're in your vehicle, where does that call go? That's a very good question. So it normally bounces off the cell towers and it goes to the nearest dispatch center. So if you're in Flossmoor, it should go to our dispatch center. However, if you're somewhere else, it could go to Olympia Fields, it could go to Cook County, it could go to Chicago. It depends on where you're at. There are some applications out there right now for your cell phone. One of them is called Smart 911. We've actually just learned about this through a flyer from the Chicago Police Department, and we have been looking into it. I just downloaded it on my phone. Basically, it's an app that once you download, you can call from any location as long as that dispatch center has the Smart 911 features. It automatically pinpoints you exactly where you're at and where you're calling from. So these are some technologies that are always improving and always changing. So we'll keep you posted. However, as Commander Taylor said in the very first presentation, was know your surroundings, know where you're at. Please know where your location's at, know your vehicle type and your license plate. So always be attentive to your surroundings. The second question is there a certain time of day that these are occurring? And really there isn't. They're occurring at times of opportunity. With COVID, we've seen a change of pattern of people going to work, people not going to work, school and other issues. So right now it's just happening all times of days and night. There is no specific pattern. Another one was, I'm concerned about the residents who are elderly or who are teenagers that may not know. The best thing that I can say is that for the elderly, we have to be the eyes and ears of the community. Everybody here that's an attendee, that's participating, has to take that step forward and be that good witness. As the state's attorney said, call 911. I don't know how many cases we get where we can't find anybody to corroborate the story of the victim and to say that they saw something and it's broad daylight, noon, and nobody reported that, hey, I saw this, or stopped to help somebody. We're all in this together, so we need to help each other. And I think that speaks volumes. Also with kids, teens that are driving the car, please speak with your teens that are driving vehicles and explain to them that the vehicle isn't worth your life. And if this happens, turn the keys over and run to safety and call 911 if you can. That is the best bet. Don't try to hold the car. Be attentive to your surroundings. I know a lot of teens, they may not be familiar with the streets or their locations. So try to teach them landmarks. Hey, I'm by Homewood Flossmoor High School by the South Building. Okay, well, now we have a pretty good idea where you're at. So landmarks are also another good opportunity to help teens to find their locations.
I'd like to add to that a little bit. I think Commander Taylor's done a great job with this presentation, and we often have the pleasure of presenting certain topics to driver's education classes at Homewood Flossmoor High School. And I'm going to offer up this exact presentation as part of their curriculum. There is some mandate that the school must have some law enforcement presentation throughout the year, throughout the driver's education program. I think this presentation would be pretty helpful at that level.
Absolutely. What are the numbers of assaults and armed robberies, and are they trending? Right now, ours in Flossmoor, and this is really what the presentation is about. I've gotten some general questions about just all of Chicagoland or just in general. And really, I can't speak for anybody else other than what's going on in Flossmoor. Right now, we've had 0 carjackings. We've had, I believe, 0 armed robberies and assaults. So we are down, and that's a great thing. However, I can't speak for everybody else. If there's an adult-sized child in the vehicle, and let's say I'm the adult and I'm driving the vehicle, and my son, he's 14 years old, but he's 6 foot and 150, you know, what should I say? I should have already kind of had that conversation with him. Hey, if this happens, we need to get out of the car. And we said it in our earlier presentation. So if let's say I'm at a stoplight and this occurs and the offender comes up to my driver's side, has a gun and says, get out of the car, give me your keys, I'm going to comply. I would hope that I already had this conversation with my child, said, hey, if this does happen, we need to get out. Hey, get out of the car, and we go the opposite direction. Never go to the direction that you think the vehicle is going to go. So if I'm stopped at a light, I would assume the vehicle is going to go forward. So I'm going to take me and my child, and we're going to move to the back of the vehicle and try to get to safety as best we can. You never want to get yourself in a path where you're trying to block and then you get ran over, or you know, anything else could happen. And then we also, the other question, you know, what are the number of carjackings in Flossmoor and Homewood to date, and what's the percentage that have been caught? Chief, in my tenure here of almost 20 years, I've never had a carjacking. I would not say that that has never happened here, but I don't believe it has. And I can't answer for Homewood. I don't have their numbers in front of us. Again, this is, you know, a Flossmoor forum. And are carjackers typically repeat offenders? I would say yes, in my opinion. Carjacking is a personal crime, and normally some other type of crime has been committed before they've done this. But you know, it's one of those things you can't say 100% of the time, you know, that yes, you know, they've had a previous arrest record. Just because you've may not have been arrested, you may have committed other crimes. But normally, you know, this is a pretty personal crime that you're walking up and you're doing this. And the last one is, are we doing any other additional patrols? Homewood and Flossmoor, the Homewood cars have actually been in their parking lots with their flashing lights on. We've stepped up patrol in all of our areas that are residential and commercial. We have 2 gas stations, Meyer and BP. We have been increasing patrol at both of those, and just trying to do the best that we can by being out and about, and just trying to be out there for our residents. So we appreciate all the time. And it seems that there's some more questions now for fall. So I'm going to turn this over to Chief Kamleiter, and then I'm going to take a look at the other Q&As and see what else we can help out with.
Well, while Deputy Chief Wagner looks at that, I'd just like to reiterate this partnership, and it begins, you know, between the community, the residents of the communities, our local police department, and our state's attorneys. I think together we can, you know, take this serious problem and you know, make a difference. And that's our goal. That's everyone's goal, for everyone to be safe. I was looking at some of the questions too. I think Clint's going through those. Go ahead, Clint.
Yeah, I was gonna say, one of the things that I'd also like to add is our doors are always open. You can always contact us. We're more than happy to try to help out any information or provide you with any information. You don't have to wait for a Q&A for this. We do Coffee with a Cop. We tell all of our residents, we are here for you. So if you have a question that we may not have answered tonight, you feel uncomfortable, you know, putting it on a Q&A, please give us a call, and we're more than happy to answer this for you. So another one was, if you were involved in an accident, you know, should you call the police right away? Yes. You know, should you get out of the car? Well, each situation is independent of itself. So you have to evaluate that. If I, you know, was rear-ended, I'm going to look in my rearview mirror, you know, hopefully if I'm okay. And if I'm seeing 3 or 4 people approach me, I probably will not want to stay there. I'll probably pull away, call 911 immediately. However, if it's, you know, a single driver, they get out, they're scratching their head, they're looking at the front of their car, it's probably a regular traffic crash. But each situation is independent of its own, and you have to just make those determinations. You know, it can affect everybody. It affects police officers. It affects, you know, state's attorneys. Everybody's involved in this, so it's literally a community problem. So overall, has there been an increase or decrease in a crime in Flossmoor with the pandemic? And actually, it's been a decrease. Flossmoor is what I've always liked to call a bedroom community, and we've seen a decrease in crime. Our population for the daytime is really decreased. Normally, our population doubles because of our schools. HF High School is a very large high school. and our population increases. And due to that, just more traffic and more things that happen, and we've really seen a decrease in crime. However, it doesn't mean that we're not out there diligently doing our job. One of the best ways to prevent that is, being out there, being visible, and letting people know that we're still here. What's the best approach to take if you have a small child in the car? Plead with them. If you have a child that's in a car seat, plead with the carjacker. Hey, my son and my daughter, they're in the back seat there too. Let me get them out of the car. Whatever you need to do, whatever pleading that you need to do, so they don't take that child. That is an enhanced penalty if they do. However, I would do anything in my power at that point to try to save my child. Plead with them. Maybe one of your first things to think about when you're in the car is, hey, how quickly can I get to my child and get them out of that seat or get them in my arms when this is occurring? It's a very difficult situation, especially if you are a single parent, or you're the only one driving that car today and you have 3 children in the back. How do you wrangle maybe a 4, 2, and 1-year-old? It's extremely difficult, and each situation again is going to land on its own, and we pray that doesn't happen. If an accident or crime occurs outside of Flossmoor, do we need to report to Flossmoor? No. So if an accident or crime occurs outside of Flossmoor, I would ask that you report it to the correct jurisdiction. However, if you're unsure, we're more than happy to try to find it out for you and get you in the right direction and report that.
All right, Deputy Chief Wagner, I'm going to grab the last question I see on there. And if you have any additional questions, or you don't feel like you received the correct, an appropriate answer or a more complete answer, you can reach out to any of us. We're here to answer any questions you have. There was a question in here about whether we're recording this and whether it would be available for viewing later. Yes, this session has been recorded and it will be up on our website and available for you to share with your family members or neighbors that maybe didn't get a chance to see it. We're also thinking about making this a quarterly event, maybe not always talking about this particular topic, but any topics that the residents may want to talk about. So you can also submit those either in the chat, or you can give us a call and give us ideas for our next community safety meeting. We're coming up on the hour here. I'd like to just thank everyone that participated. Thanks you for all the great questions. Mr. Mayor, appreciate your time tonight, and our friends from the State Attorney's Office certainly appreciate you taking time out. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you to everybody who participated here this evening. Thank you to our wonderful panelists from the State's Attorney's Office. And thank you to our residents who came out here this evening to get information. It never hurts to things that you may know already. I know I learned a few things here this evening that I didn't realize about, and it was a very, I think, informative presentation this evening. So thank you to our police department. Thank you to the State's Attorney's Office, and thank you to everybody who showed up this evening.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a great
Chief,
evening.
Deputy
Thank you.
Chief, Commander,
Thank you.
Detective. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.